and to have alterations made if necessary to ensure a comfortable and flattering fit. Despite these challenges, vintage fashion offers a unique and exciting way to express personal style and promote sustainability and ethical fashion practices. By embracing vintage fashion, individuals can celebrate the history and artistry of fashion, connect with the past, and contribute to a more sustainable and ethical fashion industry. Whether wearing a flapper-style dress from the 1920s or a power suit from the 1980s, vintage fashion offers endless possibilities for creativity and self-expression. In addition to wearing vintage fashion, there are other ways to incorporate vintage style into one's wardrobe. For example, incorporating vintage-inspired pieces, such as a 1950s-style sundress or a 1970s-inspired denim jacket, can add a touch of vintage charm to any outfit. These pieces can be found at many modern retailers and can be paired with both vintage and modern pieces to create a unique and personalized look. Vintage accessories can also be a great way to incorporate vintage style into one's wardrobe. Vintage jewelry, hats, bags, and shoes can add a touch of glamour and sophistication to any outfit. These pieces can be found at vintage shops and online marketplaces, and can be paired with modern clothing to create a chic and timeless look. Another way to incorporate vintage style into one's wardrobe is to upcycle or repurpose vintage clothing. By altering or transforming vintage clothing, individuals can create one-of-a-kind pieces that reflect their personal style and creativity. For example, a vintage skirt can be shortened and paired with a modern blouse, or a vintage denim jacket can be embroidered with a personalized design. In addition to incorporating vintage style into one's wardrobe, there are also ways to appreciate and collect vintage fashion as a hobby. Collecting vintage clothing and accessories can be a fun and rewarding hobby, and can involve learning about different eras, designers, and styles. Vintage clothing and accessories can be found at thrift stores, consignment shops, and online marketplaces, and can range in price from a few dollars to thousands of dollars for rare or designer pieces. In conclusion, vintage fashion offers a unique and exciting way to explore different eras and styles, express personal style, and promote sustainability and ethical fashion practices. Whether wearing vintage clothing, incorporating vintage-inspired pieces, or collecting vintage fashion as a hobby, there are many ways to appreciate and embrace vintage fashion. With its timeless elegance and unique character, vintage fashion is sure to continue to inspire and captivate fashion enthusiasts for years to come. One of the benefits of vintage fashion is that it can be more affordable than modern designer fashion. While rare or designer vintage pieces can be expensive, many vintage clothing and accessory items can be found at affordable prices. Thrift stores, vintage shops, and online marketplaces offer a wide range of vintage items at various price points, making vintage fashion accessible to a wider range of individuals. Vintage fashion also offers a way to support small businesses and independent designers. Many vintage clothing and accessory shops are small, locally owned businesses that specialize in curating unique and high-quality vintage pieces. By supporting these businesses, individuals can contribute to a more diverse and sustainable fashion industry. In addition to supporting small businesses, vintage fashion also offers a way to support ethical and sustainable fashion practices. By wearing and promoting vintage clothing, individuals can reduce their environmental impact and support a more circular economy. Vintage fashion also promotes a slower and more intentional approach to fashion, which is in line with sustainable fashion principles. One of the challenges of vintage fashion is that it may not always be accessible to everyone. Vintage clothing can be limited in sizing, and may not be inclusive of all body types.